Good morning. Today is Sunday, August 13th, 2023. In this week's Torah portion, the Parsha of Shoftim, we learn about how the Jewish people would go to war, military ethics. And among the various rules, guidelines, the Torah says as follows: Ki seisei lamilchama oivecha. When you will have to go to war, again, it's always a negative to have to go to war, but sometimes, unfortunately, tragically, it's necessary. When you go to war against your enemies, what will happen is there will be exemptions for serving in the army. V'dibru hashotim eloam lemor, and the officers will speak to the troops before setting out for battle, and they will say to them, who is the person who just built a new house? Who is the person who just got married? And a couple of other categories. Those categories of people are exempted from serving. The simple way to understand that is because someone who just got married, someone who just built a new house, and the other categories, a person might be distracted and not be able to focus on the battle as much as they should. And they could put themselves and perhaps even others in danger. And so therefore, they are exempt. They're exemptions. They're exemptions. Every army has certain exemptions. These are the exemptions. And the Torah continues, V'yasfu hashotrim ledaber eloham, and the officers would continue to speak to the troops. So the fact that the Torah says v'yasfu means this next exemption is going to be in a different category. And as we had a category of people who were going to be distracted, and now we have another category, and they would say, Mi ha'ish hayarei v'rach halevav, whoever is afraid, Yelech v'yashov leveso, go home, you're exempted. V'lo yimases levav echav kilvavo, in order for you not to lower the morale of the others. Because if one person is afraid, maybe others will start to become afraid. It's contagious. It's catching. And therefore, it's better for a person who's afraid to go home. What does it mean to be afraid? Rabbi Akiva says in the Talmud, Kimashmo. It means to be afraid, fearful. She'eni yachol lama bekishrei hamalchama. V'liros cherav shalufa. A person does not have the constitution to be able to face war and to be able to face an enemy coming at them with weapons. It's frightening. And so a person who's not able to handle that, it's better for you to go home. It's better for the whole, even if the remaining troops are fewer, but it's better for the fighting ability if those individuals go home. Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer, Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, no, that's not the interpretation. Presumably the reason he disagrees with Rabbi Akiva is, everybody's afraid. I mean, any normal person, thank God, I've never been in war. I've never been in a situation like that. But I certainly can understand. I've certainly heard from other people who have been in this situation. I mean, everyone's afraid to go into battle. Everyone is afraid when someone is coming at you with weapons. Rabbi Yossi says if that was going to be the exemption, everybody would go home. Rather, that's not the exemption. If you're afraid, you have to trust in Hashem and you have to believe in God and have faith that's going to work out. And you have to do your best. That's what warfare calls for. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, Hayarei me'avero shebiyado. A person is afraid because they committed sins. Because a person committed sins, therefore, maybe they're afraid that they will not have the merits to come out of this battle unharmed. And so a person who has committed sins, go home, because you're going to be afraid that your sins will cause that God will not protect you in this battle. So the first lesson that the Torah is teaching us is an amazing lesson in sensitivity, because there are several categories of exemptions. Now, the first category, people are distracted. A person just got married, a person just built a new house, etc. Of course, they didn't do anything wrong, obviously. They're going home. Then there's another category, and this other category is a moral or a spiritual failing. Now, if that was the only category, if the categories were separated, for example, let's say the officer said, whoever just got married, raise your hand. Okay? You go home. Whoever just built a new house, raise your hand. You go home. Whoever committed a sin and you're afraid that you're not going to have the merits, go home. And they go home. They'd be embarrassed, because that's a moral or spiritual failing. So the Torah does not say that. The Torah lumps together all the exemptions so that when the officer finishes speaking, a group of people are going to go home. And the other soldiers and the people back home, no one knows why a person came home. They came home because they're in one of the categories of exemption. So it prevents the person who had committed sins and is going home because of that prevents them from being embarrassed and ashamed in front of others. Tremendous lesson in sensitivity. Even when a person has done something wrong, don't embarrass them. Don't point it out. Don't make a big deal about it. It's between them and God, or it may be a judicial matter, but don't make them feel bad. Don't embarrass them. Okay, so let's examine Rabbi Yossi Aglili's opinion. If a person committed a sin, and because of that sin they are afraid that they may not have the merits to survive this battle, what sin are we talking about? It must be a very serious sin. It must be a very, very heavy sin that a person committed, that they're going to be worried that because of this sin, God forbid, I may not make it in battle, and they have to go home. What is the sin? So the Talmud says something just astounding. The Talmud says, Sach bein tefillah l'tefillah, a person who speaks while they are putting on tefillin, between when they put on the tefillin of the head and the tefillin of the arm, aveira hi biyado, that is a sin. And that's the sin for which a person would go back home, because they're afraid that that sin will cause them not to be protected by God in this upcoming battle. So first, let me just explain. There's a mitzvah in the Torah. Generally, it is observed by Jewish men. Generally, today it's observed in the weekday mornings during the Shacharis, the morning prayer, that men wear tefillin. Tefillin are two objects. One is put on our arm, the other is put on our head. Each one contains parchments from the Torah, and they're wrapped around the arm, and they're wrapped around the head, and that's the way that a person davens, prays every morning, weekday mornings. The word tefillin, which is a word we're all familiar with, is actually the plural, because there are two of them. And in fact, each one of them is called tefillah. Yes, it's the same word that we use for prayer, but it's the word that we use for these objects. So the object on my arm is a tefillah. The object on my head is a tefillah. Together, the pair is called tefillin. That's the plural form. And the halacha is, according to Jewish law, when a person is putting on tefillin, they should not speak or interrupt in any way between putting on one and the other. It should be one uninterrupted action. And we should not speak in the middle. We should not do anything that interrupts in the middle. So a person who puts one on and then speaks or interrupts before putting on the other, that is the sin that the Talmud identifies as being so serious that a person might be afraid they will not be protected in battle, and therefore they go home. Let me ask you a question. Yes, It's a halacha. It's the proper thing when you put on tefillin not to interrupt or speak between putting on the arm and the head. Yes, that's true. Don't do it. But this is the serious sin. This is so terrible. I mean, okay, you shouldn't do it, but this is so terrible. I mean, murder, idolatry, breaking Shabbos, eating treif. Okay, speaking between one tefillin and the other, that's so serious that a person is going to be afraid that they're not going to have the merits. So I want to share with you an insight of Rabbi JJ Schacter. The mitzvah of tefillin is that we put them on our head, on our arm, and we're not allowed to interrupt between the two. The mitzvah of tefillin is a mitzvah that indicates to us, that expresses that when we serve God, we have to use our head and we have to use our arm. Both our head and our arm must be used together to serve God. Using our arm to serve God means using our actions, doing the right things and not doing the wrong things. Actions are symbolized by our arm. Using our head to serve God means that when we do those actions with our arms or our fingers or our feet, whatever part of the body we are physically doing the actions with, we have to also use our head. We have to be mindful. We have to use our intellect. How should I do this properly? Why am I doing this? What does it mean? What does it mean to God? What does it mean to me? What should I be thinking about? What should I be gaining from this action? It's a sense of mindfulness while I'm doing the action. And here's the point. If there's an interruption between the two, in other words, if we have one but not the other, then our service to God is flawed. It's damaged. There are Jews who think in their heart of a connection to God. They want to be connected and to be intimate with God, but they do not perform the actions that lead to it, like observing Shabbat, like keeping kosher, like putting on tefillin, and all the other actions that we do, like giving tzedakah, like doing acts of kindness. They think it in their heart, but it's not expressed in action. That's flawed. And then there are people, and I would suggest that for many in our world, this is more prevalent. This is the more problematic thing that we need to worry about and work on. There are people who do the actions, but they don't think about it. The arm is there, but the head is missing. We do actions by rote. We do actions without concentrating, without mindfulness. Why am I doing this action? Why am I desisting from certain kinds of work on Shabbat? Why is this food kosher and not that food? What does it mean? What does God gain from it? What am I gaining from it? What does it mean to me? What's the symbolism? Either one of those, the head or the arm, alone is insufficient. And if we interrupt between the two, meaning we separate the two to indicate, well, it's enough if I just have the arm, or it's enough if I just have the head, that's a serious flaw in how we serve God. And that doesn't relate just to tefillin. It may be the fact that generally it is Jewish men who put on tefillin in the morning of weekday mornings. But this approach to Judaism is something that applies globally to every single Jewish person with every single type of activity. If we make this mistake that the arm is enough without the head, or the head is enough without the arm, that is a serious, serious flaw in the way that we're serving God. And that is a flaw. It's not just an individual isolated sin. It is a flaw in our entire approach to religious life. That is a flaw that may, in fact, remove our merits of being protected by God in a serious battle. This Friday is Rosh Chodesh Elul, the first day of the Jewish month of Elul, the month of preparation for the Yom HaNoroim, the days of awe, the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkos. And as we enter the high holiday season, we need to remind ourselves that the actions we're going to go through, we have lots of mitzvos, lots of ritual activities, lots of other mitzvah activities to do with our arm and with our mind, with our emotions, with our intellect. We need both. We need to do the actions alongside the mindfulness of the significance, of the meaning, of the impact. We need the head and the arm together. Only when we have both connected without interruption, without separation, only then can we properly serve God. This awareness, this understanding applies to every single one of us all the time. And this week's Torah portion is the time that we remind ourselves of this important lesson and hopefully incorporate it into our lives. My friends, I wish you a great day, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.